Hello, GeoTracers. This video gives a brief tour of the major functions of the DOoR portal. The DOoR portal is the system that must be used to register datasets for inclusion in IDP 2021 and subsequent IDPs. The central concept of the registration process is to create a barcode that uniquely identifies a cruise scientist and parameter combination. The barcodes are then used to track your dataset through data submission, intercalibration, permission for release, IDP assembly, and association with publications. The DOoR portal is accessed at this URL. When you enter that URL, you will come to this welcome page. In order to access the DOoR, you must use your ORCID ID to log in. If you don't already have an ORCID ID, clicking on that button will also get you to the page where you can register to get one. I do have an ORCID ID, so I will enter it in and I will log in to access the DOoR portal. New since July 2020 is that the DOoR portal now allows both PIs and data generators, such as a trusted student, postdoc, or technician, to register the data and upload standards and intercalibration reports in the DOoR portal. Your role as PI or data generator will be specified in step 2. Okay, so after you've logged in through ORCID, you will be asked to complete, correct, or confirm your email and affiliation. This is so that we know how to contact you. And then you'll be brought to the main menu. Note that the main menu shows all the list of the possible actions that you can take, but before I go through those actions, I want to point out that there's a major change in IDP 2021, which is that it will now be made available under the GEOTRACES Fair Use Agreement, rather than requiring users to formally register, and you can see the text of the Fair Use Agreement here. So let's go through the main functionalities of the DOoR system. So let's start with step 1. This is where we register our data sets and generate the barcodes. Step 1. For GeoTraceS data products, a data set is organized by cruise and then by parameter. So first, let's select a cruise from which to register the parameters. You can either scroll through the list of known GeoTraceS section and process cruises, or you can select or type in a part and select, or you could type in a part of a cruise ID, section ID, or cruise alias to filter the list. There are other options to register compliant data, here, for example, or to email the GeoTraceS Data Assembly Center, or GDAC, about a missing cruise. Let's say I want to register data from GA03, which is the North Atlantic Zonal Transect from the US GeoTraceS program. Since this section was done in 2 legs, then these 2 cruises will pop up, and I will select one from which to select and register my parameters. You have to register parameters separately for each leg, but there's a very easy way to copy them from one leg to another, so you don't have to choose them again. So I will select this one, and once I've selected a cruise, then we will be able to see the parameters. So let's proceed to select the parameters that we'd like to register. And GeoTraceS parameter names follow a very specific naming format. All parameters are grouped into one of 8 domains that you can see here. And each parameter name is composed of up to 6 separate tokens to describe the element, the oxidation state, the atomic mass, the phase, the data type, and the sampling system. There are 2 tools that we have here to help you find and select the correct parameter names. The parameter search tool, which is the default, and the parameter tree exploration tool. The parameter search tool is probably most useful for those less familiar with the GeoTraceS naming convention, so let's start there. So once you select a domain, let's select dissolved TEIs. The element and compound list will be populated with parameters in that domain. If you don't see your element or compound in the drop-down list, you may want to try searching for it in another domain. So after selecting an element or compound, I'm going to select iron. The possible additional tokens to describe that element will be populated. For iron, all token columns are populated since there are so many forms of iron that are measured. You could select oxidation state, for example, iron 2, or none is just total iron. For atomic mass, you could select 56, 54 for iron isotopes, or none for total. For phase, you could select any of these different phases. And then the data type will be populated depending on what is in some of these upstream tokens. So here it's populated with conc for concentration, and it would change to delta if we chose the isotopic ratio. So you see that now that's delta. So finally, we have to select the sampling system from which the sample was collected. And bottle will be a common one, but you may have also some samples, for example, from the trace metal clean-toed fish, and you would have to enter those data in separately and register them in separately. So I'm going to select bottle, which is quite common. And now I've selected all of my tokens, and I will add plus, and it will show up in the selected parameters window. Okay, so I've now added dissolved iron isotopes to the list of selected parameters. I will now also add dissolved iron concentrations, since I also measure that at the same time, and plus. And so now we see in my list of selected parameters, we have isotopic composition of dissolved iron and also just the dissolved iron concentration. I will also know that I also sampled from the fish, and so I will now have dissolved iron from the bottle and dissolved iron from the fish. Okay, so that was the parameter search tool, and you can explore how that works. Another way to do it is to use the parameter tree exploration tool, so let's try that. When we clicked that, we see that the ones that we selected using the parameter search tool are still there, so you can toggle back and forth seamlessly. You may want to explore one or the other because one version might be more intuitive to you than the other. So the parameter tree exploration tool lists all of the domains again here. And we can choose our domain, so let's again choose dissolved TEIs. That plus expands the domain to show the sampling systems. Let's expand the bottle. That expands to show a list of element and compound types. Let's scroll down to dissolved elements. And now we can, it's listed all of the possible parameters that fit under this sort of tree. And so we will, let's say, add dissolved cobalt, dissolved cadmium, and dissolved copper. And be sure to read these very carefully because we want to make sure that it's dissolved, not total dissolvable, not total, or that you choose the appropriate one. If you choose the wrong one by mistake, let's say I click that, soluble iron, but actually I realize I don't do that, then I can click on that black trash can, or unclick it here to remove it. There's another place later on where you can remove parameters that have been registered if you realize you registered the wrong one by mistake. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. I've finished selecting my parameters, and I will be asked to confirm that these are in fact the parameters I want to register. So if I realize I've made a mistake, I could cancel and go and change it, but I will confirm. And you see that those, you may not have seen it, it went quickly, the parameters went away, and that was the barcodes being generated for each parameter, and then the success pop-up window shows up to show me that my data sets have now been successfully registered and saved, and the barcodes have been generated. So now I can stay on the step and then use the same parameters but register them for a different cruise. So for example, if I want to register the same parameters for a different leg of different cruise, or of the same cruise, I could click on that and I would just select the new cruise. The parameters would be already selected. I would just click OK. I could also add parameters or register a different cruise, or I could be done with the registration process. So we're going to stop here for step 1 for now, and then we'll move on to step 2. Okay, so this is step 2, and this is where we designate who the responsible principal investigator is. This is also where we give credit to associated researchers such as co-PIs and also such as students and postdocs and technicians. So for the purposes of the DOoR portal, the designated principal investigator is the person who we designate as responsible for giving permission to the data to be included in the IDP and to be released. If there are co-PIs, just choose one person to be the designated PI, and the co-PI should be entered in as associated researchers. If we scroll down, you could see that this column is for the associated researchers, this column is for the principal investigator, the principal investigator was already indicated for these first few parameters. These are ones that I had registered before. And then these are the new ones that I just registered, and you could see in red it says you must indicate who the principal investigator is. So this is a really important point. This is new for July 2020 and on, is that you must explicitly indicate who the principal investigator is. Without someone in this column, then some of the later steps, such as uploading intercalibration reports, will not be enabled, and you won't be allowed to do that. But first, let me give credit where credit is due and actually add in the orchid of my student, because I want to give him credit since he did all the work. And so I have to find his orchid, which I just found. And his email, sometimes the email will be auto-populated. Unfortunately, you can't enter in the email to auto-populate the orchid. You have to go and search the orchid yourself. If you don't know the orchids, you could do this later and come back and enter it in later. Okay, so then we save. And now Yang's name has been entered in here, and I'm going to copy it and paste to all of these other ones to indicate that he, in fact, did that work as well. Okay, the important part, of course, is to indicate the principal investigator. And so the pop-up shows the possibilities. It'll show basically anyone who's in the associated researcher column, as well as whoever is doing the registration. Since I'm doing the registration, my name popped up. Yang's name also popped up because I put him in the associated researcher column. But since I am the PI, I select my name and I save. And again, I can just copy by clicking on that little middle one and paste clicking on the right one. And I want to be sure to copy this to every single one. If you have a lot of parameters, you may have to go to a different page, so don't forget to scroll to the next page and make sure that you enter in a principal investigator for every single parameter that you register. Okay, and we can come back to this, add additional associated researchers if we gather their orchids later. So let's go to the next step. Okay, so once you've registered your data and you've associated your associated researchers and also designated a principal PI, and that is in step 2, then step 3 is where you can generate an intercalibration report as well as generate a data submission template. So first, I have to select the appropriate cruise, and that's NOR 204. And here you see now all of the parameters I've just registered. And this is the place where I'm generating an intercalibration report template. Now, of these, let's see, 6 parameters, I could submit one intercalibration report for a combination of some of them. So for example, iron from the bottle, iron from the fish, those are the same methodology. Cadmium is the same, copper is the same, cobalt is the same. So I'm going to group all of those together and submit one intercalibration report for all of these trace elements. But I'm going to submit a second and separate intercalibration report for the isotopic composition, since that is quite different, and I will be intercalibrating with a different group of scientists. So now I will download 2 intercalibration reports. I'll just download one for now, and it'll pop up and show up here. Okay, so this is the intercalibration report template that I just downloaded, and you can see that there's the cruise ID, the submitting investigator, that's me, and the parameters to be intercalibrated. And here you see the official parameter name, as well as, probably for the first time, you'll see that 6-digit alphanumeric barcode that is uniquely identifying parameter, scientist, cruise. Don't change the barcode. Once it's generated, don't touch it, because that is our master tracker for making sure we don't lose your data. So the intercalibration report will now have a list of 9 questions that will guide you to intercalibrate your data with colleagues, say, from another country, or following the intercalibration procedures, which are, there are links to illustrate what those are. Okay, so this is something that will take some time, and you would do it offline. But for now, let's go back to the DOoR portal and talk about the second part of step 3, which is a very important part, which is this is where you generate the data template for the registered data sets. So this is very important. The DOoR portal so far, all we've done is we've registered our parameters, but we haven't actually submitted any data. And in fact, we don't submit data through the DOoR portal. The data gets submitted to data centers. The DOoR portal is there just to generate to register your parameters and generate the barcodes. But we generate the template here, which is, I opened the Excel spreadsheet. And the Excel spreadsheet, there's also a CSV spreadsheet. The Excel one is a little bit easier to read because things are color-coded. Okay, so here is your Excel spreadsheet. You'll see your name, the ORCID ID, the cruise ID at the top in this dark yellow. You'll see bright yellow here. These are the sampling metadata you'll need to identify your data. You may not have to fill in all of every single column, but you need to fill out enough information to uniquely identify each sample. And you should fill this metadata in to be consistent with your cruise logs. Okay, if you scroll over to the right, you will see headers with your registered parameters. The full header data, let me resize this so that we could see it better. The full header data string with the parameter name and the barcode is in this blue, highlighted in this blue row. The barcode in blue must not be changed. The white row is just the parameter name, the human readable parameter name. And then the recommended units for reporting your parameter is in green. Note that for every parameter that you register, there will be 3 columns. So this is the iron isotopic composition for dissolved seawater. And you can see that there's the column for the value, column for the uncertainty, and column for the quality flag. So we recommend a 1 standard deviation of uncertainty, but there are communities that prefer to represent 2. And so if you must present two standard deviations, then just edit this here and make that into a 2. And do that here too. And also, you may, for example, want to report your data in another unit. Again, the ones in green are the ones that are recommended, but if you want to report in another one, you would just edit it here. And then finally, the quality flag, we recommend that you use the CDataNet quality flag, and that is here. You could see there's a link to the GeoTraces quality flag policy and also what the CDataNet quality flags are. Okay, so you will now fill this data template offline with your data and submit it by email to your national data center. So for US, Dutch, and French and Chinese PIs, you go to your national data centers, and everyone else you submit to GDACT, the GeoTraces Data Assembly Center. So just to repeat, the data template is generated inside the DOoR data portal, but the data submission is by email outside of the data DOoR portal. Okay, let's now get out of this and go back to the DOoR portal. We're going to close and go back to the main menu here. And this is a good stopping point for the first DOoR interaction. All data sets that you've registered are permanently saved within the DOoR system. You've downloaded your intercalibration report templates and your data submission template. And so now you can log out and go work on those reports and the data submission. So you would log out here. And you could log back in when you're ready to submit your intercalibration report. So let's say we've done that and we've completed our intercalibration report and submitted our data. So now let's go through the rest of the steps. After you've completed the intercalibration process and filled out your intercalibration report, let's click on step 4 to upload your report. Note that the person who registered the data or the designated PI can submit an intercalibration report as long as that designated PI has been recorded in that step 2. If you did not designate a PI in step 2, you won't be able to upload your intercalibration report. So make sure that step 2 is done and that principal investigator has been designated. Okay, so let's select the cruise. So that's the one cruise that we registered. All the registered data sets are now listed. And now we want to select the parameters that are covered in the intercalibration report that we want to upload. And so if you recall, we grouped all of the trace metal concentrations together. And so I will select those. And the isotopic composition we decided to do separately. So I will click upload. Whoops. That's what I need to click. Okay, and I'm just uploading a random file right now. And I will click upload. And now this pop-up shows me that my intercalibration report has been successfully uploaded. This also notifies the Standards and Intercalibration Committee that my report has been uploaded. So now they know to look at it and to evaluate my report. They may contact me offline to ask me for clarifications. They may ask me to submit a revised report, and that would happen in a later step in the List My Datasets page if they ask for a revised report. Okay, so I will now close. I can upload another report. So I still haven't uploaded the reports for these elements, so I can do that if I wanted to. But for now, I will go back to the main menu. And I will go to the next step, which is to give my permission to use the data in the IDP. Step 5. Step 5 is where we grant permission for data to be assembled into the GeoTraces IDP and to be released. The scientist who registered the dataset or the designated PI can select datasets, cruise by cruise, and parameter by parameter to grant permission for inclusion in the next IDP. So for example, here I will select the ones for which I had just did my intercalibration report, and I will give permission to release that in the IDP. So they've disappeared from this view, which is the uncategorized data set, and they now appear in the authorized data set. So those are the ones that I just provided permission for. If I later decide that I no longer want to provide permission to release a particular data set, I can remove authorization, and now that has gone into the unauthorized data sets. It is really important that you provide permission to release the data. You can go through the entire process of registration, intercalibration, but if you do not provide permission to release the data, we will not release your data. So please provide the permission if that is your intention for it to be released. Okay, so that is the permission step, and again, that can be done by the person registering the dataset or the PI. Let's go to the next step. Step 6 allows you to enter in publication DOIs for any of your registered datasets so that we can ensure that your data are correctly cited. So please note that the DOI format to use is just the DOI itself and not the HTTPS part of it. So let's see, for this, I will put a DOI and here I'm just copying it from somewhere else and I save it. So now I have a DOI associated with this data set. That's the publication DOI. We can also put in a dataset DOI. If you don't have a DOI yet, don't worry about it. You can always come back to this later. Okay, so now let's go back to the main menu. And now we've gone through all of the main steps, but there is one more really important one, which is called List My Datasets. Well, there's also update your email or affiliation, and that's pretty straightforward. So let's go through List My Datasets. List My Datasets provides a way to keep track of what you've done, as well as make some changes. You can see all the datasets from all the cruises that you've registered. You can keep track of which parameters you've entered an associated scientist for and submit an intercalibration report for. If the SNI committee has approved your intercalibration report, a check will appear under intercalibrated. And so these are the ones that show that I have submitted an intercalibration report. None of these have been checked off by the SNI committee, so none of these show a check mark. You can see whether you've provided permission for inclusion, and so a thumbs up sign shows where I have provided permission, and thumbs down sign shows where I haven't, and then nothing shows up if I haven't said either way yet. The GDAC status here indicates whether your dataset has been ingested by the GeoTraces Data Assembly Center. DOI shows you whether you provided the DOI. And all the way to the right, here, there's one parameter that I registered and that I didn't submit an intercalibration report for. And I realized that I actually registered that in error, so I actually don't do iron isotopes, so I can delete it. Notice that trash can is not enabled for any of the other parameters, presumably, and that's because I have submitted an intercalibration report for the other parameters. Presumably, if you've gone through the trouble of submitting an intercalibration report, you didn't register it by mistake. So you can't delete a parameter for which you have already submitted an intercalibration report. If you are asked to submit a revised intercalibration report, that's where you would do it. So you would click here, and you can upload a new version of the intercalibration report. So if you hear from the S&I committee that they want to see something else, it's in List My Datasets. Okay, so now we go back to the main menu. And that's it. Hopefully this has been a useful introduction to the new GeoTraces DOoR data portal. A comprehensive PowerPoint guide, also in PDF, is also available on the geotraces.org website and also on the splash page when you first go and enter the URL. And we'll hold help sessions as possible at various upcoming meetings and workshops. So happy GeoTraces!